I crossed the border. It was by that time night. There were stars. I don't remember the moon. I just remember a lot of stars. And there were just fields. I was just walking through these fields. I didn't know which way to go. Should I go straight, right, left? I was all alone. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have anything. But I felt totally at home. I was so happy, so grateful. Literally, I felt that I was being embraced by my mother. I went to the Himalayas. And the first day I was there, sitting and meditating on the bank of the Ganga, one sadhu came up to me. I never saw him before. He told me, take off your Western clothes and put them in the current of Mother Ganga. I only had one set of clothes, some pants and a shirt. And when you only have one thing, you really become attached to it. It was my identity. But it seems that this person, he wasn't asking me, he was telling me. So I put my clothes in the Ganga, and he gave me the robes of a sadhu. Like this, except white. And I found a cave in the Himalayas to live in. And for 1 month I sat on a rock in the current of the Ganga and meditated, prayed, and mostly just observed Mother Ganga and nature. And incredible lessons were coming to me. At the end of the month, many things happened, and I decided I would start to meet the different holy people. Yogis and sages. Some were world famous later on, some were completely unknown. I lived in a cave with one yogi, and he told me that you must stay here with me for the rest of your life. He was a very powerful person. His name was Tatwala Baba. And he used to sit in meditation without moving, sometimes 12 hours. I was sitting next to him. I moved every now and then, though. But I would sit in meditation next to him. He would not open his eyes. He was like this. I was like this, but every now and then I'd go like... He was a very powerful person. And, I was just a little boy, and he had long, matted hair. The only clothes he wore, even in the winter, because I was there in the winter. This was January 1970, December 1970, I was with him. And he only wore one little strip of burlap as a loincloth, a kopin. So when he told me that I must stay with him for the rest of my life, I was afraid to say no. And I was really honored that he was inviting me. But I understood that I want to see more things and meet more people before I come to such a ultimate decision in my life. But how to explain this to him? So right after about a week went by, I was just about to try to explain him, but I was really very concerned that he might curse me, or something might come out of his eyes and burn me. I didn't know what was going to happen. Just when I was about to speak, he said, "I understand." And I kind of explained to him, and he said, he blessed me and said, "May God be with you." So I left the cave. I crossed the Lakshman Julan Bridge in Rishikesh and started going north. Through the forest, I came to a clearing. What I saw there horrified me. I saw people, some were naked, some were in filthy rags. They were so poor. It was now getting toward the spring, but it was still very cold in the Himalayas. Some would bury their body with dirt to keep warm at night. Nobody cared for the lepers. They were desperate. They had nothing and no one. And they saw a person with light skin. About 15 of them surrounded me and were screaming, "Bakshish, bakshish!" And they were putting their fingerless hands in my face, demanding bakshish. They wouldn't let me go. A tight circle. And they were fighting with each other to get closer to me, to be the one to get the donation. If I had anything, I would have given everything, but I had nothing. But they didn't believe me. And as they were screaming, "Bakshish, bakshish," they were spitting in my face and they were putting their hands in my face. I didn't know anything about leprosy, except I heard it was contagious, and I was wondering if I would end up with them. I remember thinking, how terrible it is that they're doing this to me. And then I was thinking, the way that they are suffering and the way that they are completely rejected by the whole of society, anything they do is acceptable. Finally, after about 20 minutes or so, they thoroughly searched me, every part of me, and discovered I actually had nothing. So the circle dissipated and they all went their own way. I took about 3 steps, and such a sigh of relief. And then about 15 feet to the left of me, what I saw made me stop in my tracks. It was an old leper woman. Half her hair was bald, half was white. Her whole face was deformed. Her nose was just kind of like a bloody mess. no fingers. She was laying on her side. And she kind of got up with her arm. And she looked at me. What I saw in her eyes was she saw what her people did to me. And she felt such deep compassion for me. In her eyes, I could see her begging forgiveness from me from what her people did. And I looked deeper in her eyes, and I saw the love of a mother. I saw in her something that was so deep, the desire to show motherly love to a child, something that she probably had no chance to do for decades. And she was almost pleading with me to accept her affection. She didn't speak English, but it was all in her eyes. Such love, such compassion. I became so moved. I ran over to her. She put out her hand first like this. Actually like this. And then she put out her palm to bless me. And I ran and put my head under her palm. With her palm on top of my head, she said over and over again in Hindi, "May God bless you, my child. May God bless you. May God bless you." And I looked up at her. I was on my knees with my head practically on the ground. And when I looked up, she was smiling. She had no teeth, but she was smiling in ecstasy. And from her eyes, tears were flowing. Tears of joy. The joy of giving. This was one of the greatest transformations of my consciousness in my life at this moment. Because as I looked at her, the ugliest thing physically I have ever seen, I was thinking, she's the most beautiful person I've ever seen. We've all heard the saying, you cannot judge a book by looking at its cover. What is real beauty? In this modern world, people have a tendency for such superficialities. Beauty is something that we see with our eyes, but actual beauty is something we feel with our heart. All she wanted in life was to give someone her love. She wanted nothing in return except for someone to just accept her love. And she gave it unconditionally. It was beautiful. I was looking up at her and I actually saw that with my eyes that she was really beautiful. I thanked her and I walked away and went back to the bank of the river and meditated on this. The Atma, the eternal soul, is seeing through the eyes, hearing through the ears, tasting through the tongue, thinking through the brain, loving through the heart. But it's that living force that's the source of real beauty. Without it, the body's just a dead corpse. But how we have the tendency to be affected by all these weapons of mass distraction within the world. Distracted from our real meaningful existence. That leper woman became one of my prominent gurus at that point in my life. I went higher in the Himalayas and met one sadhu. He was about 6'5". He was like a mountain himself. He had long matted hair, so long that it went, when he stood up, it went a couple feet on the ground underneath him. He was somewhere around 65 or 70 years old. At least he looked that old. He became a sadhu when he was 12 and roamed the forest alone ever since. His name was Kailash Baba. He carried a big trident and one of those drums that go with the ball that goes. He was really scary looking, but he was one of the softest, gentlest, kindest people I ever met. He taught me how to live in the jungle. He taught me which herbs, which leaves, which fruits you can eat and which you should not eat. He taught me where to find medicine. The jungle is like a pharmacy if you understand how it works. I'd get sick and he would just, pull something out of the ground and tell me to eat it. I ate it and I'd get better. He taught me how to live with our neighbors. Besides the two of us, our neighbors were leopards, wild boar, cobras, vipers, wild elephants, mosquitoes. What he taught me is if you want to survive in the jungle, they are more powerful than you. If you feel superior to them, if you have an ego that I'm better than them, or if you fear them, they will kill you. They rule over the jungle. If you see them as your brothers and sisters, without fear, if you respect them, they will respect you, and they will never harm you. Now, this was a good lesson to study and assimilate and maybe, apply it later. But the problem is they were all around me. He was telling me I had to live like this immediately if I want to survive. And you know something? Because he had so much confidence, just being with him, I wasn't afraid. When I'd see these animals, I would fearlessly just respect them with confidence that God is in their hearts, just as God is in my heart. He taught me how to beg as an act of integrity. He taught me that to beg as a sadhu is actually to give You're going to give God's blessings, not to take. So many lessons. He taught me more than I learned in all my schools in America. The amazing thing, he did not speak a word of English. And I didn't speak Hindi. I learned so much from him with no language. He would just, by his glances, by his pointing, he would speak a language I couldn't understand, but he would speak with certain emphasis so I could actually understand what he was saying. And I learned from him that if a teacher genuinely cares about his student or her student, then that power of caring transmits knowledge and wisdom even greater than the language it's spoken. And I thought back when I was in school of all the teachers I had in America. This, the one that I learned the most from was the one who really cared about me. But it didn't compare to Kailash Baba. After some time, I continued my journey, met so many people, ultimately came down to Varanasi, where I meditated on the burning bodies at the Manikarnika Ghat from sunrise to sunset, trying to understand the nature of death. That was quite a college subject for me. I went to Gaya, Bodh Gaya, and studied Buddhism. Calcutta, I was with Mother Teresa for some time. And then I came all the way to Mumbai to take a meditation course. And then I was planning to go back to the Himalayas. So I took this 10-day meditation course somewhere near Bhuleshwar, in a little factory, actually. The teacher was teaching in this little factory. And I was sitting for about 8 to 10 hours a day in meditation. And after the course was done, I just wanted to walk. I didn't know where I was going to go, but I started walking and walking and walking and walking. I didn't have shoes. And then I came to a stoplight in South Mumbai. And as I was waiting for the light to change, I looked up and I saw this gigantic hoarding that advertised a spiritual festival. And I was interested in everything in spiritual. It was at Cross Maidan. So when I arrived at Cross Maidan, there was this massive tent, a pandal. And in the evening, there was about 20,000 people in that tent. And I was way in the back. Is that music? I was way in the back. And there was people performing kirtan on the stage. And the guru came onto the stage. I could hardly see him because I was so far away. But he attracted my heart so deeply. He was walking with such confidence, with such grace. His expression, from what I could see, looked so humble. And he sat on a raised seat. And as others were chanting, there was one man going around taking photographs. And he called that man over. And I saw him speak something in his ear. And then that man, for a few minutes, he was looking out into the crowd. And then he was signaling for someone to come. But no one came. So this man, he was a light complexion person. He came down into the crowd, walked all the way to the back, through thousands and thousands of people. He came right up to me. He was an American man. And he said, "My Guru Srila Prabhupada wants you to sit on the stage with him." And I asked, "How does he know me?" He didn't say another word. He just took my hand and pulled me. And I was very pullable in those days. So I just let him pull me, and he pulled me through thousands and thousands of people, and we came to the stage, and he brought me right on the stage and brought me right before Srila Prabhupada, his guru. And Srila Prabhupada smiled, and with folded hands he greeted me. And then he didn't speak because the kirtan was really loud, but he just offered me to sit just about this far away. He deeply moved me. And after the lecture, he invited me. He said, "Every morning I'm speaking in Hindi and every evening in English for the next 14 days. You are welcome to come." So I was there. And I remember in my heart of hearts, something was saying, "This is your guru." But my mind was saying, "No, this cannot be. I cannot make this choice yet." So after the 14-day festival, I said goodbye and went back to the Himalayas, where I lived for some time. Now I'm going to come to a conclusion really soon. I had to go to get a visa extension. And I was going up to Nepal. I lived in Patna for some time. That was very interesting. In Patna, I lived with this Ram Sevak Swami. He lived at the Collectory Ghat on the bank of the Ganga. Some really fascinating stories there. But I'll skip on to the next part. In Nepal, I was living in a place called Swayambhunath under a tree. And it was the monsoon rain season. So I found a nice tree. And there was a monastery. Sometimes I'd go in. A Buddhist monastery. One day, I just decided to take a walk. Just like in Mumbai, I had nowhere to go. Sometimes I just get an urge to walk. So I walked through these rice paddies, and I saw something incredible. These rice paddies in Kathmandu Valley were so expansive. There was no houses in those days. There was no trees, just rice paddies as far as the eyes could see in all directions. And I went to Kathmandu and then started going back about 3 miles to Swayambhunath. Big, dark clouds formed in the sky. It started drizzling rain. And I understood that there was going to be a major storm. So I was looking for some shelter because I only had one set of sadhu clothes. There were no trees, there were no houses. But I saw a distance away what appeared to be a little old man with a long beard walking with an umbrella. So I was determined to get under that umbrella. And you know how rice paddies are. In the monsoon seasons, they're thick mud. And there's that little border that you could walk on. So I was walking in the border, and I was slipping and trying to stay in the border, and I somehow or other ran up to that person and went really tight behind him. And started raining really hard, and I was under the umbrella, and he was walking, and I was walking right behind him. It was quite incredible, because we were the only two human beings as far as the eyes could see in the middle of this monsoon rainstorm under one umbrella. We walked for about 15-20 minutes together. Then the storm stopped. He never turned around. I guess because, he didn't want to fall in the mud. I said, "Thank you." And for the first time, he turned around. When he saw me, and my eyes opened, it was Gary, my friend. The last I saw him was 1 year before in that cave in Crete. And we had absolutely no communication because I didn't know where he was going, and I never had a place to stay, and there were no cell phones. We embraced together again. He went to Israel, and he worked on a kibbutz, and then he made money. He was getting paid, and he took a bus, the magic bus, to Delhi. And because it was so hot in Delhi, he and some friends got a house in Kathmandu Valley, and he decided to take a walk that day. We miraculously met. I told him, "Gary, you are in India now. I will train you how to be a sadhu." So he became a sadhu with me. And we used to jump on these third-class trains because they were so crowded, ticket collectors couldn't get in. That was the sadhu's way of hitchhiking, because it's free. There's a price, but not in rupees. And I'll end with this little ending. We boarded a train. We went down by truck from Nepal to Gorakhpur, and then to Patna, and then we went by third-class train to Varanasi, and I showed him the burning ghats, and Kashi Vishwanath. And I remember I was praying and crying to Kashi Vishwanath, "Show me my path." I had met so many gurus and so many religions. I studied Judaism and Christianity in the Middle East. I studied Islam. I studied Tibetan Buddhism, Burmese Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. I studied under Shivites and different types of yogis of different schools. What is my path? I liked everything and I liked everyone, but I didn't know. I realized I had to follow a path. And I was crying to Kashi Vishwanath, "Please show me the way." And I was taking Gary to Amarnath because there was a big pilgrimage there, and I was told that if you go to Amarnath during this pilgrimage, all your desires will be fulfilled. So I had this desire that God show me my path. So we jumped on a third-class train. It was so crowded we could not sit. It was just jam-packed. And we were in this big field, and there was a monsoon rainstorm that poured so much that the whole field flooded. The train stopped for 20 hours. You know what a traffic jam is like? There's a certain propensity of human beings that we like to move forward. We don't like to be stagnated. Well, we couldn't get out of the train because it was just a lake of mud. And after about 25 hours, finally, the steam engine blew its whistle. And then it was like being liberated, just hearing that steam engine moving again. And 5 o'clock in the morning, we stopped at a station. And Gary and I, we were on our way to the closest place to Amarnath. But we were so thirsty. And we so much wanted to breathe fresh air. And we so much wanted to move that we crawled out a window of that train and drank some water and breathed air and walked around. And after some time, the train started moving, and we tried to get in, but we couldn't get in. It was just solid masses of human bodies. We couldn't get in. The train was gone. And after everybody left the railway platform, there were just a few sadhus sitting on the ground. And I asked them, where am I? And he said, this is Mathura, Krishna's birthplace. And today is Janmashtami, Krishna's birthday. And then he asked, would you like to see the birthplace? We didn't have anywhere else to go. So we went to see the birthplace. And then I told Gary, I heard about Vrindavan. I said, I'm going to Vrindavan. And I went there, and I roamed around, and Gary met me there. And because it was Janmashtami, there were a lot of people. So Gary wanted to leave. So I said, I'll meet you at the Brahma Ghat in Haridwar. And from there we'll go to Amarnath. I'll meet you there in 4 days. And I was sleeping on the bank of the river Yamuna. And the morning I was supposed to leave, I couldn't move. I had typhoid fever. High fever. Sickest I've ever been in my life. And ultimately, Krishna would not allow me to leave Vrindavan. And by the time I got better, I never wanted to leave Vrindavan for the rest of my life. So that's kind of how I became like this. And 6 months later, Srila Prabhupada came to Vrindavan. And there I studied his teachings and spent nice time with him. And decided I want to help him in this beautiful mission of compassion. One of the themes of this book is my parents. Please try to understand. Their little 19-year-old son left home and said he'd be back in 3 months. And 4.5 months later, they got a letter saying I was hitchhiking to India. It was postmarked Iran. And including in the book are my letters to my parents, because they saved them all. And in the end, my mother and father, they started coming here to India and meeting the people. In fact, it was Dr. Desai, who was here a moment ago, who convinced my father to come here. And they were so transformed. When my mother passed away, they did something in the history of my family never happened. They cremated her body and gave me the ashes to put in the Ganges, in the Ganga in India. And in a couple of weeks, my father, who's 89, he'll be coming back to India for Kushal Nupur's nephew's cousin's marriage. Forgive me if I spoke too long, but I'm so honored and grateful to have had this opportunity to be with all of you. Thank you very much.